First devastating weekend for the Tories and the Rishi Sunak leadership as the Conservatives suffered heavy swings to Labor in local council elections. Now, Britain, as you may or may not be aware, doesn't have anything like our state governments. It's got big local councils and then a national government, so two layers of government, which is why these results are at a local council level are such an important insight into what's ahead for the Tories. Indeed, analysis says that if these results were to be replicated, well, the Sunak government would be shown the door in a landslide for the first time in 14 years. More on this, I'm joined by former Victorian Liberal MP Tim Smith, live from London. Well, Tim, it's hard to underestimate, isn't it, the scale of what happened in the UK over the weekend, and also the number of pro-Palestinian candidates elected. I'll play a grab from one of them in a moment, but just in broad terms, how damaging is this for the Tories?
The local election results held in England on Thursday were a catastrophe for the Conservative Party. Andy Street, the very popular mayor of the West Midlands, lost, and that really showed how much trouble the Conservatives are in, because Andy Street was universally respected, very popular. The West Midlands is around Birmingham. There was a by-election as well on Thursday in Blackpool, and the Tories suffered a 30% swing against them. So basically the Tories' vote is somewhere in the mid-20s. Now, that is end of days stuff. So the Tories and Rishi Sunak are in so much trouble that I actually think his leadership is safe because, for one, 60-odd MPs aren't recontesting this election. There's about 50 who know they're going to lose anyway. And Suella Braverman came out yesterday in quite extraordinary interview and said that she regrets supporting Rishi Sunak, but he has to take the Tories to the election, and that they've got really no alternative. They have to get in behind the Prime Minister to try and save the furniture.
I mentioned those pro-Palestinian candidates. I want to play a comment, pretty shocking scenes from one Greens Party candidate. Have a listen.
We will not be silent. We will raise the voice of Gaza. We will raise the voice of Palestine. Allahu Akbar!
Allah Akbar in the UK. We've just gone through a democratic election and that's the result.
Yeah, that was a councillor up in Leeds, I believe. To concentrate on one of the bigger councils, so in the West Midlands, for example, the candidate that came third, Ahmed Yaqub, he ran on a purely anti-Zionist platform and got 11% of the vote. So Labor here has actually got quite a big issue with hemorrhaging votes to George Galloway on their left on the Gaza issue. So this is going to be quite interesting, the way this plays out for the general election for the Labor Party here. In a first-past-the-post system, you've got Tories hemorrhaging massive amounts of votes to Reform, that's Nigel Farage's crowd on the right, and Labor potentially hemorrhaging votes on the left to pro-Gaza anti-Zionist candidates backed by George Galloway. So that's going to be quite an interesting dynamic going forward for this general election. But if I could just focus on the Reform issue for a moment, Andy Street in the West Midlands lost by 1,500 votes. 34,000 people voted for Reform. The Tories are going to get, if Nigel Farage returns to frontline politics, and that's a big if, but if he does, heaven help the Tories, particularly in the north of England.
What do you make of these reports that the Tories think they're so far gone, they can't salvage Rishi Sunak? This goes to the line from Braverman that you've just got to back him in, let him lose, let him, take the show out with him, and that Boris Johnson would join with Nigel Farage to basically reboot, rebuild centre-right politics in the UK under a wholly new banner?
I don't think it would be under a wholly new banner. I think it would be under the Conservative banner, and it really depends on what Nigel does regarding this election. If Nigel sits this election out, which is what he's currently suggesting, and returns to frontline politics after the election, potentially rejoining the Conservative Party, remembering Nigel was a member of the Conservative Party in the 1980s, then that would obviously be a dramatic reset in centre-right politics in the United Kingdom. Obviously, there are many Tories who are completely opposed to the idea of this. And if you think about the Liberal Party in Australia being a broad church, well, there are 350 Tory MPs in Westminster at the moment. I suspect there'll be far fewer after the next election. But the Tory party is a massive broad church, and at least a half of it would think the idea of Nigel Farage returning to the Conservative Party as total anathema. So watch this space, Peter. I think the next year in British, particularly Conservative politics, is going to be absolutely fascinating.
Or terrifying, depending on your viewpoint. Tim Smith, thank you. That was great analysis.